Right. Don, it's an absolute pleasure to have you back on the podcast today. How you doing?
Good. Glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And yeah, no, we always have good podcasts. And, you've been here from the start when I started out, and, we always have good chats. And yeah, I just kind of, you've got a few things you want to discuss on the podcast. And I kind of run through the first kind of like topic. And you mentioned like about a book, your third book that's coming out and what's involved with that.
Yeah, so I'm a couple weeks away from finishing the final edits and then publishing my LinkedIn book, and it's going to be basically a step-by-step blueprint of how to go from zero connections or a small amount of connections to 30,000 connections, which is the maximum LinkedIn allows before you can have a follow only. And the reason why I'm writing it is just for people that I've met over the years who are either looking for jobs, lost their job, trying to network in business. And LinkedIn is a gold mine if you know how to work it for both networking as well as making money. But there seems to be sometimes like a black box, like how do I do it? Some people talk too serious, some people are kind of shy. So this just takes somebody from day one who doesn't know much about writing, doesn't know much about networking, or even people that have been doing it but just need a refresher of some cool tips and tricks that have worked to skyrocket their network. So I'm pretty excited to bring it to everybody.
No, that's awesome, and I think it's a really good point because I mean, when I first started LinkedIn, I didn't really know. I was new to networking, and it's kind of how I learned to network. And there were, at first, I mean, if someone doesn't know how to network, it can be quite overwhelming sometimes because there's so many avenues and there's so much detail there. And I think it's great that you creating this book that allows people to kind of learn how to network and like how to make money through it and how to build those connections because I think a lot of the time sometimes people just gain connections but trying to gain those right connections and things like that.
Yeah, and I mean, part of the book is just for people that are kind of shy or introverts. It shows them how to start connecting with people that have a high probability of accepting. And then I'm building up the confidence from there. So it's almost like if you're starting out at a nightclub or a party and you really don't know anybody and you want to make some connections, some friends, but you're shy. So I talk about who's probably the first person you want to connect with. And then from there, who else to connect with in their network. And once you build the confidence, you can start stepping up to I would say like higher perceived value connections. So people who are either wealthy, people who are either celebrities or just people who are highly networked. And it's kind of that step by step, like even for the shyest introvert, like here's what I did. Because me, I mean, if I don't have a few drinks, I'm not a big social person, but I learned how to navigate LinkedIn almost as being an introvert. And so I think that helps. And what's fascinating is as you start making the connections, and we've talked about this on prior episodes, you're going to hit the momentum effect. So you're going to expend less energy over time getting connections, and your connections and the LinkedIn algorithm will actually do the work for you. And when that happens, it's mind blowing because people start finding you. Hey, let's connect. Hey, I want to introduce you to these people. Here's another free connection. It's fascinating once the LinkedIn algorithm kicks in and almost puts a rocket booster on your back.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point, and I think it's that algorithm and those you kind of start getting the right kind of or the connections that are kind of in the field that you're in a lot of the time. And I've noticed that with some of the connections that I've had have been say in podcasting or coaching, and prior to that it was just like blockchain and Bitcoin and kind of the spam of like uh, LinkedIn and social media. And yeah, some I used to think to begin with, I was thinking they're just bots, but the genuine real people who were nice people, and said gave me a lot of compliments. And it's amazing how you said how it can once it I mean it isn't mine isn't rolling like for thousands and thousands of people following me, but I've noticed an uphill in the traction a little bit. And as you mentioned, it's trying to learn how to navigate your way through that, if that makes sense. And do you think sometimes people create a LinkedIn profile? Like, what would you say prevents that from happening sometimes? Do you think people create a profile, don't put in the right descriptions or the right fields, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking to a girl yesterday who's lost her job during COVID and she's up to networking and she's starting to do interviews. She has a great photo. She's got a good profile, but the description she wants to work on, and she feels shy. Like, how do I approach people? Because she's used to people coming to her, and now that's not happening anymore. So that's part of the reason. The part of the steps I'm showing in the book is like, can you get those first few invites? Like if you've ever played sports, they call it like a throwaway game. You go and play like the worst team or the easiest team and get a quick victory and you get your confidence up. On LinkedIn, you could just start connecting with people that are already really excited about networking. I mean, as long as you're not a spammer, you've got a high probability of connecting with them. And so that's where it starts with the confidence building. I think the second thing is just we have since the days of old, I mean, when we were cavemen roaming the plains, is just a deep fear of rejection, right? Because in the old days, if you weren't in the tribe or you got kicked out of the tribe, there's no food, no relationships, no nothing. You're just cast off into the desert. And I think that lies deep in our lizard brain. It's like people don't want to be rejected. They don't, I mean, they may see someone they want to connect with, but they don't have that confidence. And it's almost like, well, what if they say no? And so part of what I'm showing them how to do is like, even if they say no, you're going to get better at getting yeses. So almost like the more no's you get up front, you learn you don't do that anymore. And then you're going to get more yeses.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point, and especially if people are afraid of rejection, and if people, you know, are scared of that rejection, and it stops you from reaching out. But like you said, like if you keep on getting those, you just kind of push through that and find different ways of doing it. And I think like with with me on LinkedIn, sometimes I like to get to know people, or people to want to get to know you. And sometimes I think, like, business is business and sales is sales, but sometimes people don't gain that rapport with you. They just want to throw stuff at you. And I find that quite. Do you think sometimes people in their approach, people like, because it's very deep, isn't it? There's so many layers to it. Like it can be your photo, um, the way you structure your name and your description, your bio. Do you think all of these kind of things kind of contribute to that, and structuring it in a certain way and having the right words?
That's part of it. But now I think we've reached what I call LinkedIn 2.0. So the original LinkedIn was a bunch of people, especially business people, corporate types, in and they're talking like they do in the office. They're using these odd buzzwords that nobody can relate to. They're talking at ninth and 10th grade English above people's heads. It was almost like snooty, right? Like, oh, I'm a VP and I don't engage in conversations unless you're a VP. And now what's happened is smart people a couple of years ago broke the dam wide open. They started talking to you like a regular person, even if they are a VP, even if they are a CEO. So the people that are crushing it on LinkedIn are talking in what I call barstool conversations. Just you and I sitting on a bar stool having a beer, but we're sharing tips like, how can I help you network? How can I help you get better grades? How can I help you get more business? And so part of the what you're talking about with rapport is, even if you're socially shy, if you put out some killer content on your profile or posts or even comments, you're going to start seeing people show up in droves. I mean, I've gotten easily 300 connections from blog posts outside of LinkedIn on Quora. So I'm posting question and answers on Quora, like picking fun at middle managers and the raise and bonus process and corporate jobs. And I get people that come over from Quora and track me down and say, I had to connect with you. Like, what else do you have? And so if you can bring that bond, that barstool conversation and put the content out, you almost don't have to have that opening awkward conversation. People will warm up to you because you've started off the relationship by helping them. Like in the book, I talk about every relationship can be treated like a bank account. Every time you ask for something or take something, that's a deposit. every time you give or compliment or take an interest in somebody else or their content, you make a deposit. And the goal is you don't want to go bankrupt.
Yeah, no, I really love that concept, and I think that's so true and so accurate with, networking and LinkedIn, and like giving out, putting out good content, and you know, sharing other people's posts, commenting on other people's posts, you know, um, helping them out, sharing what they're doing, and giving them feedback. And you post something, someone's gonna like yours, and it will. It's a bit like that karma kind of effect, isn't it? Like, and you should look at it like a currency. I never really looked at it like that, but it definitely makes sense. When you put it in those words.
Yeah, I mean, you and I were talking before this about compound interest. If you help enough people, if you inspire enough people, if you even if you bring enough people to a conversation, right? I've seen
Yeah.
threads that get 300 comments, 500 likes. If you could just bring that many people together by posting something funny or posting something that helps people, you're giving what's called social currency, right? Because
Mm,
now people will be apt to share your post. Why are they sharing it? Because your writing's good? Possibly, but let's ask ourselves the selfish reason. The selfish reason or the personal reason is it makes that person look good. If you share something that I posted, if you like a book that I wrote, that says more about your values, right? You're projecting that out into the world. And so
mm,
maybe you get more social currency and more attention by sharing my stuff or sharing John Doe's stuff. I mean, it just speaks to I found I found a powerful principle from Quora and other blogs where people come and find me on LinkedIn is you said exactly what's on my mind that I don't have the courage to say. And so that's a
mm,
big thing you can do on LinkedIn. Or the joke you cracked made me laugh so hard I spit coffee out, right? And so that's how you
yeah.
connect on LinkedIn.
That's a really good point, and I think I've noticed that, like, sometimes I'll kind of I've put things out there on videos or posts, and people will agree with it. And I think sometimes, like you said, sometimes people might be held back for whatever reason to not say it, or say what they're thinking, or put it in a post. And I think it's that kind of encouragement. It can inspire other people, can't it? If you say something or put something out there, someone else might think, oh well, perhaps I can post something like that, or perhaps I can start doing this as well. Have you found that, like, through doing it, people start kind of thinking, oh well, how do you do it? And then they start getting that confidence to, post content that they like or feel strongly about.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, part of the book I talk about the way to stand out on LinkedIn is to not be a corporate drone, not use words like think out of the box or let's action that. I talk about barstool conversations. I use slang, right? Nobody 3, 4 years ago, nobody would even think to use slang or even like some words. I mean, you blot out the swear, but like even swearing sometimes. But
Yeah.
what does that do? Why is that working so well for people like me and other people? And I'll tell you why. The answer is if you use corporate words, if you stifle your language and your personality on LinkedIn, you're not selling yourself. You're selling a packaged fake version of yourself. And if you
Mm,
can't even be real with your words, why would people want to connect with you? See, when I use slang, like for instance on Quora, I call people cats. Like these cats they don't know
yeah.
what they're
I
doing
think
when
I've
it's
seen.
time for a bonus, right? People say, "Oh, wow, this is exactly how this guy would talk if we're just sitting on a bar stool together." And so when
Mm,
people see others doing that, they say, "Wow, I can just be myself. I can take the tie off and take the mask off and just have some fun." And once they let their guard down and start having fun, the content just pours out of them, right? The personality
mm,
comes out and their network explodes.
yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think, feeling comfortable, isn't it? And what you're posting. And I mean, being mindful of what you're posting, but obviously, not feeling like you have to be someone else, if, by or structuring it in a certain way. And I when I post stuff, I have to, like, look over my grammar sometimes, because I'm so laid back sometimes in my texting to my friends. I'm like, is there a capital letter? Is there is there a speech mark, and all of these things? I mean, which is, good, but trying to be comfortable in not trying to, not like you're sending it to a manager, for like a CV, if that makes sense. Just, using slang and using, if you're going to curse, people blot out the words. Um, I think, like I said, it's definitely been a shift, hasn't there? And you've been there since the early days of LinkedIn, so you must have seen all of these things like change.
Yeah, I mean it's been a very welcome change because it was getting so stuffy and so, for lack of a better term, like elitist, right?
Yeah,
And there's no problem celebrating if you have a big win, if you make a lot of money, if you get a new promotion and you want to get some love for that. That's great. But it was more of like, don't talk to me this way or don't use those terms. Now it's great because it's like we said, it's that barstool conversation. It's people's personalities coming through on LinkedIn. And I mean, a big part of it now, and I feel a shift in the world too, is the people that are doing big things, whether it's LinkedIn or business, there's an energy level. And by energy level, I mean that person is comfortable with who they are in just about any situation. They don't have to pretend like, hey, with these people, I'm person X, with these people, I'm person Y. They have an energy where they can just be them, write what they want to write, sell what they want to sell. And if you like it, great. And if not, that's fine too. But there's no pressure or perceived anxiety. It just comes out naturally.
yeah. I think that's a key thing, isn't it? People want to feel comfortable, and like people are going to notice it if you're not being genuine, or if you're posting something and appear in a certain way. And sometimes you see it and you notice it if someone's not being genuine, or they might not respond to certain comments because they probably don't know how to sometimes, and you can see that. So you have to be very, very careful, don't you, on these platforms, because sometimes I see certain people that I know posting things, and I'm like, you probably shouldn't post that, because what if your employer sees it, or someone sees it. So I think you have to still be very careful, don't you? Do you think, in the content you put out?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to agitate for there's certain topics that could get you in a lot of trouble if you have a regular job, like obviously religion, politics,
Yeah,
things like that. So some people toe the line and they put a humorous spin on it and they do well, but I agree with you. I think it's more of just, if you have an opinion and a strong view and you're not putting people down in a bad way, and you're bringing either wisdom to it or humor to it, you actually enhance the experience of topics that maybe you couldn't talk about. But I agree with you. I think for certain people trying to get a job, you don't want to go like full crazy on politics because it's going to do a lot more harm than hurt. I mean, we're not changing anybody's mind in politics. You're going to vote for who you're going to
yeah,
vote for. So I agree. Avoid that.
yeah, yeah. Because I've seen things with vaccines and non-vaccines, stuff like that, and I nearly shared one once the other day, and I was like, I'm not sharing this. It just might go the other way, and people are all going to have an opinion. And I think, yeah, just being mindful, isn't it? And I was thinking as well. You mentioned uh, on one of the points, like a fascinating test or something like that. Yeah, you did, or one word change.
Yeah. So there's a site called PickFu, PickFu, and it helps you crowdsource book titles, book covers, and a few other questions. You have to spend some money, but the intelligence you get is fascinating. So one of the things I did is I tested a book title and that one, and then I wanted to make sure I optimized the subtitle, because if you look at, I'm a big 80/20 fan, which is what you and I talked about before, is like there's a few levers you can pull that make huge differences. And for book sales on Amazon, assuming that somebody doesn't know you or they're not on your email list, like somebody completely new who comes across your book, there's three things they look at that drive their decision making of whether or not to buy your book. The first is the title, the second is the cover, and the third is the book blurb. So in this book, I'm trying to put in more work of spending, like, get a killer cover, get a killer title, and then subtitle, then a blurb, because I didn't do as good of a job last time, but I'm learning. So I found this site PickFu, and I'm like, all right, I got my title at one by a definitive amount. I threw up 5 subtitles to give the description of what you would expect. And so 2 of the subtitles had exactly the same words, All I did was change the word easy to simple. And the simple one won out by 4 times the amount of votes that the word easy did. And what's fascinating about that is on Pick Fu, they give you descriptions on why they chose it. And they said, some people said, simple, easy tells me that it's like, it's too easy that it's not believable. But the word simple tells me that it's a simple process where I'll have to do a little work, but it's easy enough for me to follow where I'll be able to make something of this book. And so intelligence like that just blows my mind, because if you could spend a couple $100 up front, either with Facebook ads to test titles and covers, or pick Fu like I'm talking about, you get deep insight into what your audience wants. And again, it goes back to the power of words. Some of the people I look up to most making piles of money are good with slinging words, right? You could say it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And a simple change in 1 or 2 words makes a gigantic difference.
Yeah, no, it's very powerful, isn't it? When you mentioned it, like the words that we the words that we use and how people interpret and perceive words just automatically, even when it comes to books. And I think, like words can stand out to you, in the cover, like you said, the cover, the blurb. And I think they're the things that I look at, automatically when I see a book. And I don't really look at the ratings too much or anything like that. Those key things. And it's like you said, like easy and simple. Like you see books like Five Simple Steps to XYZ, and it sounds like a really. I mean, I've never heard of this site or program you mentioned before, but by the sounds of it, it seems pretty effective in a good way if you're wanting to create a book. Because, like, I think sometimes people have ideas, or we have ideas, kind of try and overcomplicate the words, if that makes sense, to describe something where you might not need to, and just have something that resonates with somebody quickly, if that makes sense. Do you think it's people do that? It's pretty automatic. They look for certain words and why they stand out.
Yeah, as I was saying earlier, there's a couple of people I follow that make a lot of money with basically using words, sales, and copywriting. And from all their wisdom, I've distilled that there's certain principles that every human responds to. We love novelty. We love new things. We love easy or simple. Why? Well, because it's the path of least resistance. If we go back to the cavemen days when they had to walk across the plains sometimes for a week before they found food, they had to conserve every ounce, every calorie for one mission, and that was, where's the food at, right? Because if we don't get the food, we don't survive. Another thing is just, is it safe, right? Am I going to look like a fool if I read this book, try it, and it doesn't work? Am I going to make myself worse off? And then another thing is like, what's different about this? Like, and I said novelty, but like, what's the big payoff for me? So we go back to the bar stool conversation. It's like, I could go out and have a drink tonight, right? Maybe I just want to relax. But if I go to another bar and I can have the same beer, but there's a different crowd there, maybe I'll meet some people that would expand my network or expand my mind. And that simple change goes back to what I said with Pick Fu. It's like, if you just make 1 or 2 lever pulls, it means the difference between small gains or losses and gigantic gains.
Oh, I'm on mute. Sorry about that. I forgot about that. But yeah, you were saying, like, I agree with you, and I think back to you know the caveman times, and with the way we think and the way we interpret things and the way we're wired. We do that automatically sometimes, and it's down to those caveman times and the simplicity, and that's like a fine line, isn't it? But it's so important, isn't it? In the world today, if you want to stand out, you have to kind of look at these things that we perhaps don't always think about. Like the way it's structured, the wording of it. Like it's getting more and more. I don't know if this is the right word. Like condensed. You have to look so finely even at the words that you're branding it as.
Yeah, excellent point. I mean, in the book, I talk about one of the companies I look up to is called Agora Financial. They sell financial newsletters and health newsletters, and the people doing the selling are the copywriters. So it's all words on a screen or direct mailings. They're not selling in person. And so I went down to a conference a couple of years ago to learn their secrets, tips, and tricks. And one of the things they said is you got to take the ordinary and make it extraordinary. So the exercise that we all performed in a room was like come up with an idea, say like, for instance, a LinkedIn book, right? How to make, the ordinary is here's a few step process to make 30,000 connections. Okay, I guess that's kind of interesting, but like, what do I get from that? But if I tell you a simple process to make 30,000 connections, now you gain a huge network and you don't have to expend a lot of energy. Then if I tell you it's a unique process, now there's novelty. So what have we learned from that? Well, you'll have the secrets that nobody else has, and everybody wants to know, have the inroad to knowledge that the crowd or the herd doesn't have. And so what you're doing is, like I said, you're taking the ordinary and making it extraordinary. And how can you trigger that light in people's brain to say, wow, this is something that I need and I have to have.
Do you think that this, what we're talking about with the wording of, books and standing out, kind of links into, um, is it SEO in YouTube and, standing out on that side of things as well with video titles? Because for me, I'm still learning how to kind of put out, how to brand my videos on YouTube and things like that. And these, like you said, these keywords that stand out. I mean, I know there's an algorithm, but do you think that kind of plays a part as well? Well, why people might click a certain video over another video because of the wording on the video?
Yeah, if you look at YouTube, for instance, in the search results, and I've seen changes from this as well. There's the title, there's the blurb, and there's the thumbnail image. And I've seen people with a couple 100,000 subscribers talk about when they changed a thumbnail image, no other changes, same video, same title, same blurb, they saw 3 to 5 times the amount of clicks. So that just piques the curiosity. Like one of the things they talked about is if you put a face on the thumbnail image versus just like let's say you're selling widgets, right? You could take a picture
Yeah,
of the widget, but if you put the person's face on there with a smile holding the widget, the click rate explodes. Now let's think about that for a moment. Why? Well, you can put yourself in that picture as that person holding the widget. If you just see the widget, it's static. But if you see a person smiling or with an excited face holding the widget, you're placing in your mind of here's what happens when I hold the widget. Like I can see myself do it. And if you could put people in the picture and in the movie of their mind, they're going to respond a lot more than if it's just something static.
yeah. No, that's a really good point. Like, I think that's something that I probably look at as well when I look at videos. And if you see someone's face or reaction to something, or their reaction to the thing that's going to be in the video, it kind of captures you because you think, oh, I don't know, it just automatically kind of probably draws you in. And I think it's like, do you think sometimes people, when they're starting out, have you spoken to people who are trying to, some people expect to get results straight away, and they've really got to look at like the foundations of how they're doing it, like, and because the thing is as well, a lot of people people, especially creators or podcasters or whatever, whatever they're in, a lot of your time and energy goes into doing it, so you want to get that final kind of push out there, don't you?
Yeah, excellent point. I mean, there's a lot of confusion about SEO, but if there's one piece of advice I can impart to your listeners from getting 6.2 million visitors is instead of trying to tweak things to please the algorithm and hopefully people show up, make things that make people love what you're putting out and the algorithms will take care of themselves. So
Mm,
instead of worrying about search engines for people, worry about people and the search engines will take care of themselves. They'll follow. And I think that's the and it's not a knock against people. It's just when you're first getting started, you're not sure what to do, right? It's so much material thrown at you. It's like somebody turned on a fire hose and here's 10,000 things you got to learn just to get a video ranked.
Yeah.
So it kind of goes back to the 80/20. I mean, I learned, can I make my page load fast? Because people don't have patience, right? I read a study the other day that people have the attention span of like 8 seconds, which is 1 second less than a hummingbird. So if your page takes 4 seconds to load, you now have 4 seconds left to get this person interested and clicking
Wow.
around your site, right? So it's not just a battle for attention, it's a battle for speed. And then it's just titles, because we're getting bombarded with so many advertisements every day and so much content. It's like, what do I pay attention to? And so I'm going to go back to the lizard brain here. We have something called the prime directive. And if we've seen something before in the past and it hasn't helped us, our brain automatically disconnects. Yep, I've seen it. I don't need it. Which is why it goes back to the power of, can you make the ordinary extraordinary? What
Mm.
thing can you do to stop a person in their tracks and say, wow, I'll give this thing 10 seconds to read?
Mm. Yeah, it's really powerful, isn't it? And I definitely, I think not just with on YouTube, but like, like sometimes video game commercials or certain commercials, they must use the similar kind of thing. It grabs your attention and kind of pulls you in, and then after a few seconds, you realize, oh, it's just the, I don't know, Pepsi commercial or something like that. Oh, okay, I'm not interested. Um, it's amazing how your mind kind of works and is seeking um something to kind of gain. If you're looking to find something to buy, I think that's a big thing. Trying to find something to buy, whatever that is, and sometimes a commercial can pull you into buying one thing over another thing. So all these little things kind of play a part, and like for people starting out, like would you say what would you say is like a good way of kind of learning, like because sometimes there's so many different books and there's tutorials. Like, what did you find helped you when you was kind of starting out or getting into it? Because I know you've got a very successful math website that is it it covers not just math, right? It's called math. You've got a website called Math Celebrity, and it helps
Right.
people with their homework.
Yeah, I mean, the number one lesson to start off with SEO is, if I could go back, because I made some really silly mistakes, I just threw out content and hopefully people will come. And eventually the momentum built, but I started asking myself, not just what I want to produce, but like, what do people want? So when I first started out, I'm like, let me just go through all the math books, build a bunch of lessons, throw it out there, and let's see what happens. And that did okay, but I still wasn't getting the traction that I wanted. So then what I did is I discovered a little button on Google Analytics that will tell you every search people run on your site, like the exact phrase. And what I discovered was, people aren't searching like a computer, they're searching like they talk. So for
Mm,
instance, people will ask things like, what is the square root of 5? Instead of just like typing square root of 5. Or how do I solve x minus 2 equals 31? And once I started honing in on the way people ask for things, that's when the light bulb went off and that's when we exploded. If you could figure out the patterns of how people talk, the trends they're into, what they're asking for, and you jump on that instead of trying to fight the current, you're going to move a lot faster. Like, what's the old quote, like, too many people are trying to swim upstream
mm,
instead of just grabbing a surfboard and surfing on the wave. So that would be the number one piece of advice I would give
mm,
your listeners starting out. And the second is a principle in NLP called modeling. So modeling, Tony Robbins talks about all the time, is like, go find somebody that's doing very well in something you want to do and watch what they're doing. How do they talk? How do they move? How do they think? What are they doing? And then try to deconstruct each piece. So if somebody writes a killer blog post, break it apart. What about this title is pulling me in? Is it the words? Is it the arrangement of words? What about the summary and the call to action makes me want to rip my wallet out and give them my credit card? And
mm.
once you work backwards and break those pieces down, that will fast forward your success.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate you for sharing that advice, to listeners. And I think, like you said, like modeling. is a key thing, in NLP, and in trying to kind of replicate, in your own way, to be successful, or to do something, someone else is doing, and looking at the foundations and breaking it down from the other side of it to make it work for you. And I think a lot of people sometimes just see, they don't do that, and they kind of do it the other side, the other way. Um, and it really is important, to understand how to do that, and to really, you know, like I said, by breaking it down. Um, like it's a process as well, isn't it? It takes time, and but in doing that, it will work. And sometimes I bet you've had people kind of reach out to you, and ask how you kind of did what you do as well, and it's like those kind of little foundations, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's why modeling is so powerful. It's instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, and there's nothing
Mm.
wrong with being original, taking your own spin
Yeah,
on things, but instead of trying to reinvent the wheel,
yeah,
you find out what's working and then deconstruct why. You could put your own spin on it afterwards, but the biggest part of modeling is figure out what doesn't work. Like, and you and I talked about, I think on the first time we ever did the
yeah,
podcast, was the mental model called inversion. So
yeah.
inversion is like, instead of figuring out what to do right, figure out what you do wrong and eliminate those behaviors. And I got this from Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. And when they ask him, like, what's the key to your success? And basically the quote was, we have a bunch of models we hang on a framework of, or a lattice work, and we follow that. Like, for every decision we make, we run it through those filters, and it gets rid of all the silly or bankrupting investments. Because the
Mm,
magic of inversion is, once you start eliminating what doesn't work,
mm,
what actually happens, the magic is what works just kind of comes through. If you're not constantly pulling yourself back, the only momentum you're going to have is forward. I mean, think about when they interviewed Michelangelo with the statue of David. They asked him, how did you create this? This is incredible. And he said, I just looked at a block of stone and I cut away everything that wasn't David.
yeah, yeah. That's it. It's so important, isn't it, to have those kind of like models, use those models that work for you, and have that kind of filtering process, isn't it, to attain those results that you want, and look at the things that aren't working and the things that are. And when you think about that, you really have to um, kind of do some work on yourself, I suppose, because you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to um, really accept if something isn't working, and be able to make that, to swallow that pill, if that makes sense. Because sometimes people, we're all human, can be so fixed in and tunnel vision, and oh, this is what's working, it's going to work this way. And it's like, oh, you have to peel it back a bit, and be honest with yourself, and say, look, this isn't working, I need to probably perhaps do this way. And do you think like a lot of that comes down to like being accountable, and especially like like business and this kind of thing?
Yeah, it's the toughest thing for people to admit is when they're wrong or when decisions they're making aren't working. I mean, what's the the temple or the old, I forgot the name of it. It might have been
Yeah.
the temple at Delphi, but one of the inscriptions on there roughly translated as "Know thyself." So if you can stop, and it's very difficult for most people, if you can stop and just say, "Hey, what I'm doing isn't working, or a belief system I have is wrong.
Mm,
Let me re-examine it and figure out how to get on the right track." That will catapult you to success way faster than trying to beat your own views into the ground. And there's
mm,
nothing wrong with you latching onto an idea, and maybe it's not working now, but it's just going to take time. That's fine. But if you're continuously hitting a wall in the process, something's either wrong with the process or the idea. And if you have that self introspection to pause and say, hey, what I'm doing isn't working, you're going to make big moves. I mean, the most
mm,
important examination you'll ever take in your life isn't in a classroom, it's a self examination.
mm. No, that's a really, really good point. And would you say that, during this time with the pandemic, it's been a moment for people to do that? It's been an opportunity for people to really home in on themselves and really think about things. Because I think, people have been forced to look at themselves and their lives. I mean, everyone's in different situations. It's affects people very, very differently. But I know for some people, they've done a whole 360, down to that.
Yeah, I mean, if anything else, the last year has made many people re-examine both priorities and mindsets. I mean, I was just talking to somebody the other day who had and I call it like the most dangerous thought you can have is, I never thought this would happen, or this time it's different. And that's not the case. So, case in point is the person I was talking to has a good job, but they have a significant amount of debt and they basically live paycheck to paycheck. So something like a housing crash in 2008 or coronavirus in 2020, or even losing your job for more than 3 months, that's life changing for that person versus somebody else that has saved and kind of hedged their bets. And so as I was talking to this person, they said, maybe it's time that I have some risk or some insurance in my life where if this happens again, because now it's the third time, right? They brought up 2008 housing crash, they brought up 9/11, they brought up 2020, and they got hit all three times, either almost bankruptcy or job loss or something like that. And so they said, now I see it. Like now I see the vision is like you have to have an insurance policy against things like this, because all the great investors, all the great businessmen, they do what's called asymmetrical bets. And that is whatever move they're going to make, the downside's limited, their losses are limited, but the upside is almost unlimited.
Mm, mm. Yeah, no, completely. And I mean, I don't want to go off topic too much, but do you think, how can I put this into words? Like cybersecurity and that kind of thing, like more businesses are having to invest insurance and that kind of thing, as things kind of move forward and go along. Because I saw like quite a few companies got hacked. I know CD Projekt Red, who make video games, they got hacked really bad making their game, got their details leaked on, the darknet. Do you think, people who, evolving have to think about things that they probably didn't have to, in business and technology?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it just goes back to risk and protection. I mean, in my day job, I work in insurance. And if you go back to the etymology of the word insurance, it's a pledge or a promise. And basically, you're pledging or promising to cover somebody's downside or worst case risk. And I think more people need to have their own personal insurance policies in life, not necessarily through a company, but what if this happens, right? What if I lose my job? What if, and let me pause here for a moment. I'm a big abundance thinker. I don't want to think about negative, like, oh, the sky's falling and I'm going to lose my job. But what if helps you plan for, limit
Yeah.
the downside, and then once the downside's taken care of, now your mind's free to go after a huge amount of upside.
Mm. Yeah, no, definitely. And I've had that conversation with people in hospitality, and especially where I live, it's mainly hospitality. And I know some people who are in that trade. I used to be in the trade, and if I was still in that trade, I'd be looking at other areas where I can make income that isn't going to be affected by COVID. And I think it's, then it comes back to your comfort zone and the unknown. And, there's a lot of groundwork that people have to ultimately jump through to get to the other side. But I think these are important things that people need to think about and take into consideration. Because that what if, you just don't know. And sometimes people have no insurance, they have no backup plan. There's it's important, isn't it, in today's life? And I was just thinking as well, like a random question. I was asking, I think I asked you previously, but have you had any books that you've been reading recently, or any that stand out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm huge fan of metaphysics and mental models, and I've just been reading those books like 3, 4 times. I notice the really good ones, if I read them 3 times, I learn something new every time. But by the third time, I almost make the behaviors and the thought patterns subconscious. And then there's a few that are so good, I want to read them 10 times so
Mm,
I can do the things in my sleep. I mean, I liked Charlie Munger's books about mental models. And then Shane Parrish has a couple of books from Farnham Street all about mental models, which are really good. And then I'm just going back over some of the classics like Think and Grow Rich. I'm going back over The Power of the Subconscious Mind, a couple of the other metaphysics books, and then just Persuasion, right? Because that's the last weak link in the chain that I'm trying to build is I can get the leads, I can get the traffic, but now I got to close the sales, right? I have to move people from where they're at to where I want them to be, but in a way where it helps them.
Yeah, no, I see it. And I remember like we had a conversation. You mentioned that model, by reading a book once and then 3 times, and then embedding it into your subconscious mind, by reading it, more and more. And I really appreciate, your book recommendations. I ended up reading that The Art of War, and that really blew my mind because that was written. I can't remember the day, but it was written, many, many, many years ago. I think it was the sixth century. I might be wrong. And it started talking about battle tactics and your enemy, war, and a lot of that you could apply to business and to life today. And but like it's so important to read, isn't it? And to get to know you can really develop yourself through reading.
Yeah, I'm glad you like that book because there's a power in that wisdom. I mean, that was written 300 years or so before Jesus was born. And for somebody to take the time before the printing press was invented and hand copy that, that tells you how powerful the wisdom is. And if you look at the brilliance of that book, one of the main lessons in that book is, can you win your battles without firing a shot? Can you win your battles without pulling your sword out of the scabbard? And that goes back to the power of mental models and thinking. So, and again, you mentioned a couple other books too when we've talked. I like to look at books as borrowing somebody's brain. If you borrow enough
Yeah,
smart brains and powerful brains and let the information marinate, it's almost like playing life on cheat codes.
yeah, yeah. I see it. And somebody said to me, it's almost like if you're ready to take in a book, it's almost like how did she put it? But like your soil, like if your soil is ready to receive the minerals and the goodness from that book, then you'll kind of indulge that book more rather than sometimes just kind of like reading. Some people sometimes read through it, but like a magazine sometimes. Um, no, it's definitely powerful. And was there any other points that I forgot to bring up that you wanted to talk about?
Oh, I think one more thing for your listeners that you and I were talking about before the call is something called the slight edge principle,
That was it.
and this will help entrepreneurs as well as listeners of your podcast. And I'm just looking up. I want to make sure I get the numbers right here.
Yeah, yeah,
So the slight edge principle kind of dovetails off what's called the winner effect. So as you win something, a contest or a prize, you get more confident, you get more rewards, and then you can invest those rewards into the next contest. But what's fascinating is if you look at the slight edge principle, kind of dovetails off that is
yeah.
let's take a horse race, right? The 2020 Kentucky Derby here in the States. I'm looking at the prize winnings. Fourth place horse won 150,000. Third place won 300,000. Second place won 600,000. But here's the key. The winning horse, the Kentucky Derby, won 1.86 million, which is 3 times more than second place, 6 times more than first place, and 12 times more than fourth place. Why am I telling you this? Because not only does the winning horse get the 1.86 million, they get a priority posting at the next race, which gives them an advantage. They get more media coverage, they get more money to put back into the horse and the trainer to win the next race. And so what if I could depart with one piece of advice for your listeners, it's embrace the slight edge principle. If you could just get a little better, or if you can win the competition by just a little bit, book sales, selling a customer, whatever it takes to tip you over the edge to make that next win, the wins will start compounding, and that's when the magic happens.
Mm. No, definitely. It's so powerful, isn't it? And it's crazy, with those the horse. What do we call them? The winnings and the stats you mentioned. It's a crazy difference, isn't it? And like that kind of relates into so many things. And that small, those small kind of steps and that those small little differences, and for them to be continuous and to build, bit by bit and time by time, um, over time they all kind of form together and compound. And that's something we talk about quite a lot, and I think it's so important to learn about it, because a lot of people haven't heard of it, and some people, a lot of people have, but it's so true, isn't it? I remember when we first connected, it really stuck with me, ever since. And you talk about, the 1%, the 1%, the 1%, and it really blew my mind when you broke it down. I can't remember the ins and outs, but it applied to society and the way things work. So when you think of it, when it works like that, and it ties into the races, um, it's like a law of attraction. It's not the law of well, I don't know, but it's a bit like the law of attraction in some way. It's real, it's working.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to the 1% principle, if you improve on a skill, any skill, 1% a day, most people think, oh, I'll be 30% better at the end of the month. No, actually, you'll be 30, I think it's 34.6% better, because the 1% compounds. If you extend that principle for 365 days for a full year, getting 1% better every day, you're going to be 3,778% better at the end of the year. Now imagine any skill that you could get that much progress in a year if you just make little tiny slight edge gains every day. If you were doing writing, you would be an incredible writer. If you were doing sales, what kind of killer salesman would you be after a year by making a
Mm,
small improvement every day?
yeah, yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? And you mentioned, like, before, did you mention? I think you mentioned before in the chat. The dollar principle you mentioned, like, if somebody had saved, um you mentioned it Columbus times or something like that. If somebody would have saved $1, each day, or whatever it was, they would have a crazy amount of money now.
Yeah, I was on a finance blog the other day, and somebody brought up something fascinating. They said if on the day Columbus landed in America, he put $1 in a fund, and that fund earned, I think it was 3 or 4%. At the end of 2020, he would have something like $3 billion. So no more deposits, just $1 deposited in 1492, and let it roll for 500 something years, wherever we're at in 2020. He'd have a couple $1 billion. And that's all from just compounding and compounding and compounding. And so the lesson to impart is it just doesn't have to be financial. It's skill building, right? If you
Mm,
can read a couple books, well, not even a couple books every year, but like, can you read? I like to read 50 pages a day. After 4 days, I've cleared a 200-page book, right? If I go back and read that 3 times, like I said earlier, that knowledge is buried in the subconscious. It's automatic.
yeah,
And there's somebody else brought up a great point to this. It's called habit stacking. If you can stick with one good habit to replace a bad habit for like 30 to 60 days, you bury it in your subconscious mind. Now you move on to the next good habit. After a year, right, you've got some new habits that are automatic, and your life has changed.
yeah, yeah. It's really interesting, isn't it? And I think it makes me think about something I've experienced recently. Like, I've kind of, I won't go off topic too much, but it kind of trends with it. My family are all kind of vegan and kind of vegetarian, and I've been toying with the idea of kind of going that way. And during this lockdown we was in, I stayed at my mum's for a couple of months, and I moved back somewhere else now. And because I've been so ingrained in those habits of, say, eating vegetarian food or different alternatives, I'm going shopping now and I'm thinking more about it, and it's kind of like more ingrained because I've been doing it for the past 3 months. Whereas before that, prior to that, I was like, no, no chance, you know. But I mean, that's just like one principle, if that makes sense. But I've consistently done it, and now I'm thinking, well, I'm probably, wouldn't touch meat as much as I used to because of that compounding. That's a really weird example, but that's like one thing. And then, like working out, or little tiny 1%.
Yeah, I mean, you just brought up an excellent point. So Charlie Munger, who's Warren Buffett's partner that I referenced earlier, talks about the Lollapalooza effect. If you stack enough good mental models and good decisions together, it starts to accelerate off into space. So you just brought up an excellent example of the combination of habit stacking and compound interest. So you're eating better with vegetarian or vegan, and after a couple of days or a couple of weeks, it's a habit. You don't even have to think about it. Then you add in running or cardio. Then you add in you're improving on podcasting. Then you add in the next habit. Pretty soon, it's Lollapalooza, right? You're just exploding your health, your wealth, your happiness. And I think that's the ultimate goal in life is just how can you just keep peaking, just keep
Mm.
adding more, but doing it in a way where it becomes automatic in the subconscious.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's no, I really appreciate, your support and feedback on, and on everything. It really, really means a lot. And yeah, it's pretty mind blowing, isn't it? And I think it just shows you the power of the, our minds, and how we can, create new kind of pathways and new habits through that repetition. Um, I think, it's something that should be taught to everybody. I think there'd be a lot of different things happening if it was. But I think, just by trying it out and starting out, and I mentioned it to someone the other day, and I just said to them, just start, like you said, just start doing it. Even if it's like once a week or once a day, it will build. And like I mentioned to you before we started, I've got like a few new questions which I've been asking people. I'm just going to include it in this podcast. I was doing them separate previously, but I was just thinking is, what would you say your spirit animal is? You could think of spirit animal.
Oh, that's a good question. Ah, let me think. I'd say the lion, and I know that's
Yeah,
kind of a cliche answer, but I was watching The Lion King, the original version, the other day with my daughter, and when Mufasa's sitting on the cliffside with Simba, and he puts his paw around him, and he says, "Look, Simba, everything the light touches is our kingdom." That phrase hits me because it
mm,
speaks to abundance, right? It's like
yeah,
you have an abundance of the things you can do, the mindset you can adopt, and just sitting there as the sun setting. It's a beautiful scene, not just visually, but for life.
yeah. No, I love that. I love that, and I think it's a great animal you chose, and I think that connection to it's really powerful, and it's so true. And an accomplishment that you're proud of, or accomplishments you're proud of.
I'd say last year, personally, my biggest accomplishment was getting 6.2 million unique visitors to my website without spending a penny on traffic. I mean, I get frustrated sometimes because I don't get the sales, but my wife reminded me that, we're in a good spot where you're being able to
Yeah,
affect that many lives without ever meeting these people in person.
yeah. Wow. No, it's amazing what you're doing, and that you're helping people in so many ways, because for me, I hate maths, and I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who don't understand it or they're struggling with it, and for you to help them with their homework and the tuition, if that makes sense, and to help them, get better results and grow, it's pretty rewarding.
Yeah, it's been a fun ride. It's really good to look back and think about.
Yeah, no, definitely. And what would your advice be to people who are trying to, like, figure out what they want to do in life? If that makes sense. If they're, whether that's career, education, or job, just trying to, find your way.
If you don't mind, I'm going to get a little metaphysical, a little bit
No, it's
woo
fine.
woo
It's
here,
fine.
but what's really helped me is if you can write down, you could write down a bunch of goals, but if there's one thing that's really gnawing at you every day, put it on an index card, write it down, look at it in the morning, read it out loud, do the same thing at night. And when you fall asleep, there's a power in this I can't explain, but if you fall asleep with the vision of you achieving the goal, with the feeling you'd have when you achieve the goal, as you cut out into sleep, and you do that over and over again, your goal starts to pull itself towards you. I can't explain it. I know we're getting woo woo with metaphysics, but if you can do
Yeah.
that, your brain and the energy you're putting out literally rewires itself to bring the goal to you.
Wow. No, it's amazing that is, and I think for like I said, it's hard to understand that, isn't it? But by just putting that into practice, each night or each week, and just envisioning yourself moving towards that, isn't it? And that because emotion's powerful, isn't it? It's almost like concrete, kind of tying that in with seeing yourself achieve something. No, it's really, I appreciate you sharing that. And a big failure or mistake you've made, or how to deal with failures.
Oh, that's an easy one. It's just mindset, but on the negative side. So when things go wrong, just saying, this isn't going to work, or getting frustrated as I'm on my path and maybe I have two successes, but I have one pullback, getting mad that it's not all just perfect and easy, and
Mm,
losing that train of thought that I answered in the last question of just holding the vision and the emotion of the vision if you were to achieve it in the mind for as long as you can. There's a great book called The Game. I think it's called The Game and How to Play It by Frank Lautenberg. And he uses prayer, right? And I'm not going to get religious on here, but instead of, you can use prayer, but instead of thinking religiously, you can think of your goal, and you get a
mm,
point for every time, for every minute you think about your goal, like achieving it. So if my
mm,
goal is, say, I want to make $1 million, for every minute I stop, or in my mind I could see a picture of me holding $1 million cash or in my bank account, I get a point. And the idea is the more points you gain over time, the closer your goal gets.
mm. No, definitely. I think that's a really powerful principle to have in place, and you know, to envision, what you want, and to keep on doing that, repeat that, and to really, you know, have that, and to place that in your mind, because like you said, in your mind, it almost like grows, and the more that you do it, and I think we should have big goals. We should have big goals and dreams and aspirations, and sometimes, imposter syndrome comes into it. Sometimes people think, oh, they're not good enough to, and this kind of thing. But you really should. I think it's important, to have things, to have, to have good things, to have nice things, and to be working towards, something.
Yeah, I mean, nature at its core is constant expression, right? It's constant growth. I mean,
Mm,
when does a plant stop at a certain height? No, it's going to keep growing. There's trees in I believe, the California redwoods that have been growing for hundreds, if not thousands, of years,
yeah.
and it's just a constant expression of nature for you to share your talents and your vision with the world. And what's not to love about that?
Mm. No, I love that, and I think it's it's something that is rewarding as well. If if you've grown yourself and you can help other people to in the process, it just blossoms, doesn't it? And the final one is, what are you afraid of?
I'm afraid of, in 20 years, I'm still working a day job, and I haven't hit it big with my business. I haven't achieved all that I've set out to do,
Yeah.
where I'd still be working a day job. And maybe I've had some success in business, and not just business, but with my family. Can I be the best father possible, right? Can I dilute my temper? Can I direct my kids and give them a better life than I had? And my biggest fear for failure is I don't reach those goals, right? We're not
Yeah.
living the ideal life, all of us happy, healthy, and wealthy.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you, talking about that, and being open and honest. And I think, like, human beings have all got fears, and we're all different, and we've all got fear, and it's okay to have fears, isn't it? And I think, just kind of keeping them in mind. And so I think sometimes it's how you kind of use those fears, isn't it? Like, as a driving force to to do things, and in how you kind of I think react, isn't it? It's pretty complex, but it's we can kind of use that fear, if that makes sense, in some way.
Yeah, I mean, fear is fuel if used correctly, right? If it's just, you could redirect the energy. So if you could take the fear and use the energy to go through whatever barrier you think is standing in your way, and then you can conquer that barrier, that fear
Mm,
actually turns into more confidence, right? More success.
mm,
Because if you're standing in an obstacle or something happens in your life, it's not so much what happens to you, it's your reaction to it. And so
Mhm.
that goes back to how can you use fear as a asset.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's definitely powerful. And I was just thinking as well, like, where can people find you on, like, say, LinkedIn or social media, and your website as well?
Yeah, the two places I hang out, number one social media platforms, LinkedIn. So it's just LinkedIn. You can look for Don Sevcik, the Sevcik. And then my website is mathcelebrity.com, spelled just like it sounds,
Yeah.
MATH celebrity.com.
No, awesome. And like, when your book's out, where do people find that? Is that on, like, Amazon? Because you've got a few books as well that are already out. They're still on Amazon, right?
Yeah, and it'll just be on my Amazon page. It'll probably be out in the next 6 weeks.
Yeah. No, awesome. But no, I'm always grateful to connect with you, Don, and it's always a pleasure to have you on. And I think we provide a lot of value in our episodes. And yeah, I wish you continued success in all that you're doing, and all the best.
Thanks for having me. I'm grateful for the opportunity.
No, you're welcome. Welcome. You take care.
Thanks.
Cheers.